Bretto, after 7 years of wellness summits, we are going virtual for the first time.
Oh, it's very exciting, MP. For all those Wellness Couch fans who couldn't get to a summit because of interstate or international travel, now you can join us.
No border closures for this one. Join us from the comfort of home on September 11 and 12 for a day and a night of inspiring, uplifting, empowering information, insights, fun, and of course a bit of frivolity.
This is a wellness summit like no other. Imagine cooking dinner live with Joe Whitten from your very own home.
Or joining in a group conversation with some of Australia's greatest thought leaders in health and wellness.
The theme this year is Revolution, and you're invited to join us.
Tickets are just $97. You'll receive lifetime access to the recordings and a stack of bonuses when you register.
Proudly brought to you by Positive Mentor. The rundown, the speakers, and all the details are at thewellnesssummit.com.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today we have a very special guest on the podcast, Caroline Allen from Safer, Stronger Kids, who we absolutely adore. So before we come back to you, please say hello.
Hi, I'm so happy and excited to be here. Just no idea.
That's how we feel too. So today we are talking about raising kids who know body safety, and Carolyn is definitely our expert and go-to for all things body autonomy and safety with children. So we're very excited to dive into some super juicy conversations and areas that we feel particularly are incredibly important on this conscious parenting / parenting in general journey. Before we / parenting in general, I don't think I have to make differentiations there. So before we jump into that, I'd love to remind you to jump on to nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner, drop in your email address, and then you get to stay up to date with everything we've got going on in Nourishing the Mother so that you don't miss a beat. So nourishingthemother.com.au.
And Caroline Allen, who, as Julie said, we are so happy to have here, is a social worker and parenting coach who believes all children deserve a childhood free to play and discover. Caroline is the founder of Safer, Stronger Kids and on a mission to improve children's physical and emotional safety through stronger parent-child relationships. Caroline's style is raw, real and relatable. As a mum of two girls, aged 4 and 2, she's in the trenches alongside you. She combines personal and professional experience to help connect parents back to themselves and their children. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we'd just love to start with, can you give us some insight? Because we obviously look at voids creating values, and the genius that you have that becomes the wisdom and the enormous service in this world often has a starting point or a beginning. So are you able to give us context on how you've come to doing the work that you do in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a social worker. I became a social worker. I started full-time work in 2008 with an amazing organisation called Berry Street, working with children placed in foster care. And through that work, I stayed there for a long, long time. And through that work, I spent a lot of time meeting and working with kids who'd experienced sexual abuse in particular and had been removed from home due to that sexual abuse, along with all forms of abuse. And because I was in that role for close to a decade, I had the opportunity to watch these kids grow up and really come to understand the impact on them and how pervasive it was, how it infiltrated into all the different areas of their life. So that gave me the start of a very particular passion, which was working out how we could work to prevent sexual abuse. Now, then I left that role and I had my first child, never stopped thinking about the kids who continued to be in foster care and going through these experiences. And then when I decided to re-enter the workforce, I actually found a role doing prevention work, so facilitating body safety sessions in the classroom for grade ones. And it was like divine intervention or something to find this absolutely perfect role that felt so good, because the prevention it provides, the level of education and empowerment, the impact of it is immediate and it is lifelong for the kids who listen and receive this program. And so I would regularly have kids coming and talking to me about their experiences and seeing these light bulbs go off of realising that what it was that was happening for them already was not okay. I'd have schools picking up the phone and calling me that children had disclosed abuse several months after I'd left the school because it had happened. They realised it was not okay, and they had that information. They knew that it wasn't okay, and they knew that they could speak up and get help. I've had principals in tears saying, "Thank God we booked your program." So that program that I was running in schools is an amazing program that's called Learn to Be Safe with Emmy and Friends, and it's run by an organisation called Act for Kids. So I've now delivered that program to over 3,000 kids in the classroom. And so I feel like I've answered every possible question about private parts and you name it. But then after I'd been doing that for a few years, I realised there was another layer as well, which is that we need to be teaching body safety in schools. We need for kids to have access to that message in that way. But we also need for parents to understand body safety, because it's one thing to deliver the information at school, but then what about when they go home? If the messages aren't understood and reinforced, then it gets lost along the way. And we might even have instances where at home kids experience the opposite message. For instance, they might be told, "We don't want to listen to those feelings. We don't want to hear about if you don't feel safe. We just don't have time for this. It is okay. You're not the boss of your body. We are the boss of you." And those sorts of messages at home will only undermine the good stuff that's happened at school. So actually I started to transform the message and make it, how can we deliver this for parents? And how can we move away from it just being a one-off program that we do to actually sending our kids these messages daily through our parenting? How do we actually come to have a family culture of body safety that exists in our home every single day, that guides our parenting decisions, that means we check back in with ourselves and go, is what I'm doing as a parent actually okay? Is it aligned to these values that are so important to me? So it was after I started doing that, teaching parents about body safety, that then I started to branch out into parent coaching as well, because then I realised that parents needed the skills to parent in this way. They need the skills to be able to stop yelling and to respond to their child's feelings and to teach them about consent and to stop saying, I'm the boss, you just need to do what I say, and instead be able to say, you are the boss of your body, I'm just here to teach you. So that's what I do now, teaching parents how to work it into the everyday and actually let body safety guide their parenting in every moment, in every way that we respond, and strengthening those parent-child relationships. So that is a very long answer to your question.
I just got so many goosebumps through that, and it just felt so purposeful and aligned. So I really enjoyed hearing it.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to look back and see how all those years that I spent working in foster care, that was all giving me the skills for exactly what I'm doing now. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know that this was the path I was on, but it's all come together, and it's like, oh, this is my life's work. This is what I'll be doing forever.
Do you want to know something funny? Nick and I were foster parents for Berry Street. Back
Oh, really?
In the day. Yeah, before we had kids. Yeah.
Were you really?
Yeah, we were. Yeah. Yeah, before we had kids, we went through the Berry Street program, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
They have got to be the most incredible group of workers. Like, they were just, it was the St Kilda branch. They were just amazing. Yeah. Anyway, side note. So I had a couple of questions. Do you have one burning bridge before I jump in?
No, you jump in. You go for it.
All right. So when I was reading through your about page, you'd said you'd spent 15 years working with vulnerable children, mentoring foster carers and families, and healing the impact of childhood trauma. And then obviously had taught body safety to over 3,000 children in the classroom. And then among the many incredible things, you talked about trauma-informed practice. And I was like, I want to know what that means. Are you able to just string out what that word means?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we know now about trauma is that it changes the brain. So when we experience a traumatic event, especially at any time in our life, but especially as children, it changes the way our brain is wired. So that means that children, when they experience this at any time in their childhood, it will start to shape, they will carry it with them, and it will start to shape all the areas of their life, their ability to learn in the classroom, their level of reactiveness, how quickly they descend into survival mode. And historically, we focused a lot on talk therapy for these kids, and we wanted to get them to talk about their experiences, and we thought that if we unpacked it enough, then we could help them move through it. And what we didn't realise that actually there's more to it than that. We have to actually help them rewire the brain. And one of the core ways that we do that is by making sure they continue to feel safe, by providing them with consistent, supportive, close attachments, and also through experiences like dancing, art, being creative, as well as the opportunity to talk about their feelings. It's not, the healing from trauma doesn't just happen in a therapy session with a therapist. It happens every single day with the relationships that child is in. And we need to understand them in the context of their brain changes, and we need to respond to them in a way that supports the rewiring of their brain. So, for instance, a child who has experienced a high level of trauma might have an enlarged amygdala. So their amygdala, the fear center of their brain, will actually, because it's been overactive for such a long time, really busy keeping them safe, it physically gets bigger. It's like a guard dog. Its role is the guard dog of the brain. It's always assessing for risk and there to keep them safe. Now, because, especially for children who have been experienced trauma over a long period of time, that guard dog has been kept busy for a long time. It has learnt that it needs to be big and strong, and it's been fed a really good diet, and it is so good at its job. And what it does is it's there to keep them safe. So it's there to launch them into the survival responses wherever they need to. So it will launch those fight, flight, or freeze responses so quickly. And those children are left with no idea why they've just responded a particular way. And it's so important that if we see that in their behaviour, if we see them going into fight mode, so they're presenting as really defiant, or we see them freezing and disassociating from the moment, we need to be able to see and understand what's actually going on in the brain in the moment. Because we could respond, if we don't understand it, we'll respond with harsh harsh discipline, saying, why did you make that choice? How could you possibly have thought that that was a good idea? And we just don't understand that their thinking brain had nothing to do with it. They don't know how they made that choice. It was purely based on survival. So when we understand that that's what's going on in the brain, we respond to them very, very differently. So that's trauma-informed practice. It's understanding those changes to the brain, and it's providing a whole lens shift, really, to how we respond to kids who've experienced trauma.
I love that analogy you used with the guard dog, because it makes it so clear. Like, of course, it's like that guard dog it's been really functional and helpful to a point, but now it's just like taking over everything, and it's the littlest thing now.
That's right. And especially for kids who've grown up in families where they really weren't safe, or been in situations where they weren't safe, that guard dog really did keep them safe. The guard dog was doing an amazing job. They needed it. It's just then we take them out of that situation and suddenly that behaviour is considered maladaptive or difficult. It's like, no, that's actually the exact thing that kept them safe before. So, yeah, I think visualising it as the guard dog, and that the guard dog analogy is not just for kids who've experienced trauma. That's for everybody. So as parents, our amygdala gets active too, and that guard dog is, often on alert. And for some people, it will fire up really quickly and it wants to keep us safe. So even in our everyday parenting, when we feel unsettled or stressed and our limbic system starts to get active, the guard dog starts to fire up. And all of a sudden we find ourselves in our survival responses, in fight mode, yelling, and we don't know, why am I yelling? Why did I lose it? We think, why did I overreact like that? And it's because our guard dog, has launched our survival responses as well.
What do you think? I mean, we want to obviously move into body autonomy as well, but I just want to ask you, because I'm sure there'll be listeners listening to this going, yeah, that makes so much sense. But now what do I do? What are kind of the core pillars of turning the guard dog into a puppy dog that lays in your lap?
You know what? I think that the first thing to do is to understand that it's a guard dog and that it's there and it's trying to.
Not going to be a puppy dog. Okay.
because it's the amygdala, so its job is to keep us safe. It's the amygdala, when it senses a threat, starts launching cortisol and adrenaline in the brain. It fires us up. So just understanding that its role is the fear center of the brain. It's the guard dog. Actually conceptualizing that helps us to understand what it is that's going on for us. And therefore, that's one of the key things that helps turn it into a puppy dog. Because suddenly we're like, oh, no, I know what's going on. My guard dog's trying to do the right thing by me, but that is not going to be helpful right now. So it's almost like we can chat to the guard dog. We chat to the guard dog. We tell it to settle down. We stay in our thinking brain. We say, hey, brain, I appreciate the guard dog, but what I really need right now is my thinking brain. And just that conversation with ourselves is really important, paying attention to what it is that's going on for us, how we're feeling in our body. That's the biggest shift, being aware.
So beautiful. Yeah. I love that. No, I really love that. So, body autonomy. What is body autonomy?
Body autonomy is letting kids know that they actually are the boss of their body and that they have rights over their own body. So I'm going to sum that up.
It's very succinct. What impact do parents have on body autonomy learning?
Oh, that is a big question.
And when does it begin? Because sometimes I think parents think, oh, my child's 3 or 4, should I start teaching these things? But can you explain when it begins?
It's actually something that doesn't begin. It always is. So it always is from the moment they are born. They are always the boss of their body. Our babies they are a whole person when they are born. They have rights from the moment they are born. And so often as parents, we take shortcuts. We take these shortcuts because we're already under enough stress, we've got too much going on, and also because we don't have the tools to know how to do it differently. So shortcuts include things like, just do what I say. You don't need to like it. You just have to do it anyway. Or I am the boss. get in the car now because I am the boss and I said so. Or get in the shower, I don't want to hear anything about it. So there were all these moments. So think about how often our kids can hear that message. Like, they have so little control over their own day. They have little control over what they wear, what they eat, whether they have a shower or a bath, getting in the car, how being buckled in. All of these things are done to them all of the time. And what we don't realise, as we're busy doing all of the things to our children, what we don't realise is that we're stripping away that autonomy, that we're sending them the message that things can be done to them and they shouldn't complain about it. And then if a child experiences sexual abuse, then we get surprised. We get surprised that they didn't know that they had the right to say no, or that they have rights over their own body. It's because we disempower that all of the time. And I think so often we don't mean to do that, but we do it because we don't know that there's another way. Or maybe we have an idea that there's another way, but we just don't know what it is. So we kind of disassociate. We go, oh, it can't really have that big an impact. It doesn't really make a difference. But the truth is that it does. It really, really does.
So this leads into my next question, which is what happens when kids don't grow up knowing body autonomy, and what happens when they do grow up knowing or body autonomy? Like, what's the trajectory of that child's growth and development?
There's a few different things. We know that children who grow up understanding body autonomy are less likely to be a target for sexual abuse. So in traditional real life, the grooming process in real life, it's a bit different online, but in real life, the grooming process, when a perpetrator picks their victim very carefully, they think about access to the child. They'll test them out through games, how they respond. They might lightly touch their private parts and see what happens. A child who has a background in body autonomy, who knows that their private parts are private, for starters, is more likely to be able to say straight away, no, that's not okay. If they're able to voice that, that perpetrator is quite likely to back right off before it goes any further. So that's one way. But also it's further reaching than that. For instance, picture, a 16-year-old girl. This is going to show my age, but a 16-year-old girl maybe on a first date, and they go out for a movie. I know it doesn't really work like this anymore, but let's pretend it does. They go out for a movie, or she gets bought dinner and then paid for the movie, right? If she hasn't grown up knowing body autonomy, she's more at risk of believing that she owes that person physical affection with her body. That actually, even if she's a bit uncomfortable or she doesn't really want to, she needs to offer more with her body because of what she's just received from this other person. So we want our kids to go, no, actually, no one's ever allowed to make me feel unsafe. I can be rude when I need to, if I need to be assertive. And also, I never owe anybody physical affection with my body. Nobody is ever allowed to guilt me into doing something with my body. They can't shame me into it. They can't guilt me into it. They can't coerce me into it. I have the rights over my own body. So it's when they're little, it makes a difference, but it's also for the rest of their life. It's as they're developing their sexuality. If they're being pressured to explore things that don't feel right or don't feel comfortable, we want them to know that they have the right to speak up, that they can be rude, that they can say, I'm not comfortable doing that. If we start with body autonomy early, we're more likely for them to have those skills down the track.
I'm trying to decide what my next question is. Do you have any that you want to jump in with? I'm still because my problem is I move from parent brain into interviewer brain. I'm like, hang on a minute. Got to sort my head out here.
It's also because it feels so huge. Like when we have it pointed out, it's just like, oh my God, yeah, it actually weighs really heavily.
Well, because Julie and I have a constant practice of this stuff, but you also automatically go to all of the times where you slipped up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or,
and that is what is happening in my brain right now.
Yes. Well, I just voiced it for both of us because that's what happens, right? Because when we're in a rush, we have to force them in the car seat.
Absolutely.
Or when we're angry and we pull kids off each other or something and we don't give them choice.
That's right. And so you can see how I went from teaching body safety to then realizing I needed to provide the parent coaching to back it up. Yeah. Because what we need the tools to do, we need to still be able to get things done. We still need to be able to get their nappy changed or get them into the car seat or get them in the bath or the shower, but without these messages that just take away their bodily autonomy. We need to be able to do it in a way that is empowering. And the two key things to remember in order to do that is empathy and an explanation. So if, as we're doing things, if we validate their perspective and we acknowledge their feeling about it, so we simply say, I know you don't want to get in the car seat. I know you don't feel like going to the shops. And then we provide an explanation for why it is that we need to do that. Just that process goes a long way to giving them that bodily autonomy back. And also shifting away from saying, I'm the boss of you, to instead saying, you are the boss of your body, but my job is to help you learn how to look after your body. So when you are the boss of your body, you have rights to your body, but you also have a responsibility to your body. You have a responsibility to learn to look after it. So you feed it good food, you wash, you get plenty of sleep. And our job is to teach our kids the responsibilities as well as the rights.
I really love that as a two-piece process. I think some parents, particularly if they've come from a really attachment and potentially their own trauma, they will be almost so afraid to encroach upon the body that then they'll almost be too permissive. The child, because we'll get questions about potty training because a child won't put their nappy on, for example. But actually part of teaching the child responsibility is sometimes I need to do things to your body.
I've got to look after myself.
And so that distinction is really powerful, I think, to see it as a two-part thing. That yes, you own your body, but I also have a responsibility to help teach you how to look after it.
Yeah, that's right. And just simply by talking them through it, that is the key thing. Talking about their feelings, talking about their experience, talking about the why is really important. And sometimes we just got to be able to set limits for our kids. And if we're overly permissive and we're sort of hesitate before we step in, then that doesn't help kids feel safe either. Kids need boundaries. They feel safe when the boundaries are consistent. And for parents who are permissive, what will then happen is at some point their patience runs out. They feel lost and out of control and like they don't know how to get it done. And then their guard dog takes over and launches their survival responses and launches them sometimes into freeze mode where they just disappear, or into fight mode where suddenly they're yelling. And then there's terrible guilt and shame because that is not the parent they're trying to be. So if we have the confidence to set the limit early and give them the explanation early, the empathy and the explanation, that can really help to avoid the guard dog hijacking our own brain.
And how important do you see the parent cultivating their own body autonomy as important? For example, not allowing a toddler to climb all over them, or the toddler constantly wanting to be carried, for example.
Yes.
How important do you see that as a message?
Oh, that is a great question, because that is role modeling appropriate boundaries. When we have the confidence to say, again, with empathy and an explanation, that we're not comfortable with them sitting on our lap right now, we're demonstrating that we are the boss of our body, and we're also demonstrating that that boundary can be communicated, and it can be communicated with love. It's so easy to slip into thinking that boundaries are bad, that if we have boundaries with our kids, we set limits with them, then that's quite authoritarian. But it's not. It's being authoritative. So often we think there's only authoritarian parenting and permissive parenting. We forget the one in the middle because it has an awkward, hard-to-say name. But that authoritative parenting is where we want to be, where we can set boundaries. We set them early before we get irritated, before our guard dog starts to fire up, and we set them with empathy and an explanation, and it role models boundaries so that when they get older, they can set boundaries with empathy and love as well. And they know they can do that with their friends. And it doesn't have to mean the end of a friendship. They don't have to give of themselves until they're exhausted and they've got nothing left. They can say no, and they can say it with empathy and love for the other person, and that actually is respecting the relationship, not destroying it.
Yeah, beautiful.
So I think it's really positive role modelling.
Sorry. No. I was going to say, one of the things that often comes up in our group too is, for instance, where 98% of our listenership is mums.
Yep.
So often the conversation gets a little bit sticky for them when they might have a new baby who they're moving through body autonomy processes such as, I'm going to change your nappy now. Yeah. I'm going to take your pants off. And this talking through the process involving body autonomy and parts and processes. Yeah. And then it gets a bit tricky when having that conversation with partners who are like, oh, this is ridiculous. They can't understand. Why are we this lengthens this process by 20 minutes.
Yes,
I'm not doing it. Yeah. So I was just interested in how you approach that conversation and dynamic.
With the partner?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's about providing the evidence. It's providing the evidence that says, I know that this seems silly now, but we're building a foundation for the future. Them knowing that they are the boss of their body isn't something that we just get to introduce down the track. If we want it wired into their brain, if we want it to be the lens through which they see the whole world, then we've got to start it as early as we can. And I know it's annoying, but it's not that hard to just talk to our kids as we do things. So they'll take a breath. And it's a shift. It is a shift from previous generations. And so it rubs up against something because it's like, we haven't done this before. This wasn't done for us as kids. What difference does it really make? But the research, the evidence shows us that it does.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say that I've come up with this analogy recently, which is that if you were going in for brain surgery, would you want that surgeon to operate based on the latest research, evidence, and what he has learnt recently in his training? Or would you want him to operate on your brain based on what he learnt about the brain in primary school?
Such a good analogy.
Of course, you would choose the evidence. Of course, you would choose the research. And yet with our parenting, we kind of just think it's okay to parent the way we were parented, that we experienced in our childhood. We resist looking to the research. We resist generational changes. But they're inevitable and they're important and they're okay.
I so support that. But can I ask you a sticky question that extends from that?
Yes.
The old adage, well, you were smacked and you turned out okay.
Yes.
Think about that.
I
hear that from my mum often.
My response is actually not so kind. It's actually quite a firm boundary.
Neither is mine. Go.
My response is to say that if we're thinking that it's okay to use violence to teach children a lesson, then that would demonstrate that we're actually not okay. That we wouldn't use violence, we wouldn't smack an elderly person who wasn't doing what they were asked. We wouldn't smack our partner if they weren't doing what was asked. We are not allowed to smack a dog. Why on earth would it be okay to smack a child? Our children deserve better than that. And we can do better. And yes, we all make mistakes. We all slip up. Sometimes our guard dog takes over our brain. We're going to make mistakes. But we can come back to, if we're thinking it's okay to use violence and that's going to teach a child a lesson, and that would indicate that, no, we are actually not okay.
I actually really adore that sentence. I think it's fantastic. So thank you for that, because I'm going to tuck that one away in my head too. Can I just ask you also on that is yelling, because it seems to me that in the conversations we have around parenting, there's a bit of contention, I suppose, around whether yelling is really an act of violence or not. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that when a child is upset, we've got to picture their limbic system being really active. If we then come over them and remembering that we are bigger than them and we raise our voices, we start yelling, we escalate the situation, What we do is in their brain, they release cortisol, the stress hormone, and they release adrenaline. They launch into their survival responses. So they will launch into fight, flight, or freeze. So fight would look like defiance. It might look like turning around and hitting you. And so your yelling has escalated the situation. They were already upset, now they're hitting. And then we take it further because we think, well, you're just disrespecting me even more now. And we fail to see that actually their brain is just trying to keep them safe. It launches the survival responses in order to keep them safe. And it's in that I think we get our answer. No one is allowed to make our children feel unsafe, including us. And if our yelling triggers a survival response, that means their brain is perceiving that they are not safe and it needs to take action. And so it's us that's in the wrong.
I actually really deeply love that. Thank you. There's so much about your words. I'm just like absolutely, for want of a better word, frothing over. So thank you so much.
But I think I've got to, I think that's the hardest message for parents to hear, because
I agree
everyone has yelled, and we yell for different reasons, and we have different thresholds before we get to the yelling, and it flips our stomach to think that we might have made our children feel unsafe, because that was never our intention.
Totes. Yeah.
And so I hope that I managed to deliver that with a whole lot of compassion. And it's happened to me too, where afterwards I'm like, well, okay, Caroline, you know better. Why did you not do better? But it's because we have our own stuff too. So we've got to be compassionate with ourselves and know that we are learning and we are growing and we are doing our best, and that as we learn and grow, we will change and it will be okay. The important stuff is that we understand what it is that's going on and we are trying to do differently.
And I think that this cycles back again to that point on boundaries. One of my favourite things to remember is that the boundary is the point at which you're about to lose yourself. So if you haven't listened to your own boundaries or have a relationship with what they look like, then you are often going to feel beyond capacity because you haven't listened. And so part of knowing your boundaries and practicing holding them means that you get warning signs before it gets to that point. Is how it feels in my experience.
Absolutely. And, when we teach body safety to kids, we teach them to recognise their early warning signs. So the ways that their body shows them that they're not feeling safe. So that might be butterflies in their tummy, sweaty hands, jelly knees, wanting to run away, being frozen to the ground, getting a headache, they're getting a lump in their throat, their heart beating really fast, or getting goosebumps. So we teach those early warning signs to kids, but actually they're relevant to us too. We get early warning signs that we are about to flip our lid, that we are going to lose it. And I think that if we let a boundary go, if we wait until we are irritated and we've already got our early warning signs, the problem is that then we're down, our limbic system is taking over, the guard dog is taking over. We're no longer in our thinking brain. We can't be empathic, we can't be creative, we can't problem solve or negotiate because we've lost access to that part of the brain already. So that's why it's so important to go, when it comes to setting boundaries, we need to have the confidence to set them early, before we get our early warning signs, before the guard dog starts to hijack our brain, because only then will we be able to use that thinking part of our brain and respond in the way we want to.
Can I just ask, in terms of, for instance, when we behave in a way that we now feel shameful or regretful about, what would you advise for a repair process?
So in terms of repair with our kids?
Yeah.
Just own it. Own what it is that's happened. And this is really important role modelling for our kids as well. When we do this, when we make a mistake, actually we get an opportunity. We get an opportunity to show them that it's okay to make mistakes, that we're all human and we will all make mistakes sometimes. And we get the opportunity to role model then what we do. How do we repair the relationship? So go to them and just say, I'm so sorry I yelled. I actually don't know what came over me. And in that process, we take responsibility for our feelings. Our feelings are never our child's responsibility. They are always ours. So if we lost it, it's not the fault of our child. Our feelings are our responsibility. So we own it and we show them, I'm sorry that I lost it. I don't know why I did.
Yeah.
That's owning it. It's taking responsibility. Rather than saying, you made me. Because they didn't. It was actually our choice. What unfolded was our choice. And I think that actually they do learn positive things from that, because they're going to make mistakes down the track too. So they need the chance to see that that is okay, that it happens to everyone, but doesn't mean we're a bad person, and they get the opportunity to learn how to apologise. So it's not all bad.
No, I love that.
And I take that and I take that to the I was saying that they take that out into the playground, right? So that then they take that to the playground, so that then they recognise, because if they think that they're always responsible for their parents' feelings, and they're then going to internalise that and go, well, I'm responsible for that friend's feelings who doesn't like me anymore.
I better fix it.
Right, and they're giving out pieces of themselves.
That's right. And also I see a lot of people wondering, well, if, around apologies, should we force them or should we not? And if we're not going to force an apology, how do we expect them to learn? Well, they learn because we apologise to them. If they experience us owning our feelings and apologising, and they experience how that makes them feel, then just watch and wait, because before long they will turn around. And if you give them time, if you resist the urge to prompt them, you will see the most beautiful apologies that are genuine and heartfelt and that are delivered when they're ready. And that is far more important than a forced sorry.
Oh, so agree.
Yeah, so agree.
And I just ask, I know that the majority of your work focuses on primary school and below-aged children, but do you have any thoughts around how this conversation changes with teenagers?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that I concentrate so much on these primary years, because actually the majority of my work experience is actually with teenagers. So, yes, it shifts, and it shifts in ways that are particularly important right now. So the first thing that springs to mind is around the development of sexuality for our teenagers and the influence of porn on that current culture. So Pornhub is now so pervasive for our teenagers that it is changing how they experiment with and develop their sexuality. So we need, this is not optional anymore. We need to front up for these conversations with our teenagers. We need to be willing to talk to them about consent, and that consent means a whole body yes. And if it's not a whole body yes, then it's a no. We need to be talking to them about that sex is about love, and it is about caring, and that you should never feel coerced into doing something that you're not ready for or that you are not enjoying, and that sex should feel good, because our teens are not learning that from Pornhub. It is delivering them the absolute opposite message with catastrophic consequences. So for their safety, they need to hear this from us. Now, in addition to that, if we go back even a little bit earlier to our tweens, we know that now kids are viewing pornography, whether they're coming across it accidentally or being shown it by an older sibling or an older cousin or older friend. Now we believe it's as young as 8 years old, as an average. So we have got to be on the front foot. We have got to be the person that they go to with any question about sex or whatever. We cannot risk them Googling it for themselves. We've got, this is going to be shocking and really blunt, but we have children in Melbourne who are being treated for pornography addiction at 6 years old. The consequences of that are profound and lifelong. When children experience or witness pornography, they're more likely, they can go looking for it again because they don't understand what it is they've seen. So they go looking for it again so they can try to understand. Then they try to process what it is that they have seen in the way that kids process, which is through experience, which means they're more likely to act out what they have seen on other children. We can't sit back and just let this happen. We can't pretend that it's only other people's children. It is so widespread now. It flips my stomach every time I think about it. So we've got to get brave. We've got to get talking. We have got to be our children's go-to person. They have got to know that they will never be in trouble if they come across things like that. And they've got to receive those messages around consent and bodily autonomy. It's profoundly important for their generation more than any other. And while I'm on this rant, really important to stop and know that the pornography that is available now is not the pornography of previous generations. The porn industry has progressed in order to keep people watching, to maintain a sense of novelty. The porn is getting more and more hardcore. And so the porn that our teenagers are watching isn't, vanilla. It's not some funny movie about a pool guy rocking up. It's hardcore, violent pornography. And this is what our children and our teenagers are equating with sex. At a neurological level, they're equating desire and sexual satisfaction with violence.
Yeah, I feel that so deeply. I just wonder what advice you have for the children that come across pornography and witness something that they're trying to process or understand, because as I understand it, it's even in video games.
Absolutely.
So, even the games that I know most of the kids that my kids are friends with play, and there's, sex dungeons in the so-and-so, and there's all layers to the game that you think your kid's just building something and they're traveling in all sorts of different circles.
Yes.
So when your child comes across something that they have seen, whether it is in a caricature of a game or within pornography that's flashed up as a ad or whatever, and they're trying to process and understand that, I think Bridget's got a little person in the room.
I'm really sorry. I have got it.
I'm just going to mute you, Bridgie. What are your ideas around how you help children process that? Because I really understand literally what you're saying.
Yeah.
And like you, you work with children. I work with women of sexual abuse backgrounds.
Yeah.
And some of those women have been experimented on by siblings who have witnessed things that they are trying to process in exactly the format that you're talking about. So how, as a parent, do you start to help your child dissect, assimilate, and understand what they have seen?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to start with is pointing out that in the past, we encouraged kids, or we gave the message that parents should tell their kids, if you see something, switch off the computer as fast as you can. We now need to change that message a little bit. We need it to be, if you see something, bring it to show me. Because we need to be able, we as adults, as the grown-up responding, need to be able to see what it is that they have seen so that we can understand what we're actually dealing with now. Because if they have witnessed something really violent, we might just think that it's just about sex, but they may well have witnessed something really degrading, really violent. So we need to know. So tell them, if you are communicating this message, make sure they're bringing it to us to show us as quickly as they can. If we then find out so that they have seen something, the first step is, if we didn't see it, we want to make sure that we believe them, respond with empathy, ask them how it made them feel. Tell them that that's meant only for grown-ups. And then we've got to make sure there's no shame, they're not in trouble. And if it continues to bother them, if they give them the chance to talk about it, keep giving them the chance to talk about how it has impacted them. And then we're going to go back to something that Dan Siegel talks about in his books. So Dan Siegel and Tina Payne-Bryson in The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline. They talk about the importance of letting children tell the story, and that they tell us in order to process and understand the event, they might need to talk about something several times, many, many times. We want to think that if they just do it once, that's going to be enough, but it's not. So give them the chance, open the door to the conversation to let them know that they can keep talking to you about it. If they have any more questions, they can come back to you.
How would you suggest you open that door? Like, what does that look like? As in, you're continuing to refer to the incident, or?
Yeah, I would simply say, in order to go back to it, you could say, "Hun, you know that thing you saw on the internet? Did you want to talk about that? Have you been thinking about it still?" You don't have to repeat anything more about it, but just invite them to talk about it. So often with kids, we think, oh, I won't bring that up again because it might upset them again. We do this with people who are in grief too. I won't mention the grief because I might upset them. But the truth is, our kids are already thinking about it. So they are still thinking about it. We have got to let them know that we are holding it in mind too. So simply saying, you know, that thing you saw, how are you feeling about that now? Do you want to talk about it again? Yeah. So that's how we would open that door to that conversation. And also, don't be afraid to seek external supports. So engage with mental health teams, CASA, seek out psychology support for your kids. And I think often parents are not taking this step. They want to think, oh, it wasn't that bad, and they seem to have gotten over it. But we've got to really dig in. If it's continuing to bother them, if we have any concerns at all, then seek out the next level of support. Because I think the thing that's holding parents back is shame, that they blame themselves and they think, well, I should have done something differently. And that shame silences them. But we can't afford to do that. We've got to be willing just to go, this is what's happened. Who can help me?
I really love that. Can I ask you, my next question would be for the parent that perhaps this hasn't been part of their understanding, insight or language from newborn, and perhaps they're some way into their journey of parenthood. How would they begin to approach opening up, diving into, wanting to do better in body autonomy?
The first thing to do is to start flipping your language. So when you notice yourself saying something really directive, like I'm the boss of your body, put in the replacement words. You're the boss, but my job is to teach you. I'm here to help you learn. Give them the why, the empathy and the explanation. So just start doing that. Now with older kids, so for instance, if our kids are probably 6 or older, then I would have a conversation with them about it. Tell them what it is you have learnt and what that means you're going to change. So tell them, I've learned that actually you need to know that you are the boss of your body, and that's a really important message for you to know for the rest of your life. So I'm going to start saying things differently to how I always have. And sometimes I'm going to slip up because old habits die hard, but I'm going to do my best. So be really transparent with that change.
Oh, I love that. Bridget, are there any questions you would love to ask Caroline before we do our quick fire?
I know that you've got a bunch of other resources on your website that can really help parents, and I think particularly for those parents whose children are spending a lot of time online and perhaps feel pretty anxious about some of the things you've talked about with regard to porn. What are some of the other resources? Because you've got, I know, like a safe sleepovers guide, for instance. What else can parents find that you offer for them to, I guess, dig deeper into this and understand some boundaries that they can put in place practically around screens too? Yeah.
So I have a course called Get Smart, which is an online course, and it comes with, it's 8 weeks long. I do a session per week. It also comes with an accompanying workbook. So it has information sheets so that if you get nervous, you could just read them out. It gives you the words to say to your kids to teach them all of the core areas of body safety, and as well as online safety. And it then also has notes for the parent, then it has an information sheet to read out to kids, and then it also has worksheets for kids to do alongside their parent to facilitate their understanding, to further the conversation, and then also to help them retain it. So that Get Smart course is really popular. It scares people sometimes, I think. They think it's going to be really hard or really confronting, and then often they're relieved and they go, that was so much easier than I was expecting. We spend so long avoiding these topics thinking, I just can't go there. And then when we actually do, we discover that it's actually not so bad and not so scary after all. So I offer that. I also do presentations for school groups, as in for parents via schools. There's also one other resource that is not something of mine, but I really want to encourage everybody to watch, which is to jump over onto a Facebook page called Our Kids Online and look for their documentary. It is a really hard watch. It's about pornography and its impact on children. It's about $7 to buy it on Vimeo. It's amazing. It's uncomfortable. It's challenging. But if you stick it out, by the time you get to the end, you'll be so relieved and glad and grateful that you did.
And is that a resource just for parents or something that you would watch with children or teens?
Just for parents. Older teenagers maybe, but I would encourage parents to watch it for themselves first and then make that decision.
Okay, beautiful. Is there anything that feels left unsaid or that you would really love to convey before we ask you our quick fire questions, which we ask every person who we interview?
You know what I want to mention is the two core themes of body safety that for anyone who already follows my page, they will have heard these over and over and over again, but they are so important to keep coming back to, which the first one is we all have the right to feel safe all the time. We want to really be proactive in teaching our children that they have the right to feel safe, and it's every single moment of every day, and it doesn't matter who somebody is. Even if they're bigger than us or they're a grown-up or it's normally someone we really like, no one has the right to make our child feel unsafe. And if they do, they're doing the wrong thing and our child can speak up. So keep coming back to that. We all have the right to feel safe all the time. And the other one that I want to encourage parents to teach so proactively to their kids is that we can talk about anything no matter what it is. So even if it's awful, even if it's embarrassing, even if it's small and seems insignificant, even if it fills us with shame, we can talk about it.
Oh, so you're speaking to our hearts. That's why we've got no words. We're like, amen, sister. It's one of those moments.
Yes.
So, Carolyn, could we ask you our 3 quick fire questions?
Oh, I'm nervous now. Yes.
Please don't be nervous. Question number 1 is, I know that you're familiar with our work too, so Bridge and I are often talking about how our wounds can be transformed into wisdom that then can often become service in the world. Is there a time in your life that you can reflect upon and are willing to share where you have felt a wound or a wounding of some sort and you have been able to process and move through that to gain insight, knowledge, and turn it into wisdom that you now use in your family or for yourself or, you know, any context?
Yeah. You know what? I have immediately thought of one from work, and it was when I was working within foster care and I was team leading, and I made a huge mistake, and I was so scared. But the moment that I realised as soon as I'd done it that I'd made a really big mistake, and the shame that I felt and the worry and the stress completely took over my whole body, and I didn't know what to do. Part of me in that split second was like, can I just pretend? Like, there was a chance that no one would ever know. So I thought I could just pretend that hasn't happened and take that with me forever. or I confess up. And so I just spun my chair around and just announced to the whole office what it is that I'd just done through tears. And then I ran to the assistant regional director, and then I ran to the regional director, and I just fessed up as much as I could. And it was horrible to speak. That shame wanted to silence me without a doubt. I wanted to not speak about it. I wanted to bury it and pretend that it never happened and hope that nobody ever found out. But I knew that I couldn't. So I spoke up. And then, of course, because I've been so honest and transparent, they worked alongside me to fix it. And it was all okay. It was completely okay. And so for me, the message in that is that we can talk about anything no matter what it is. When we feel shame, when we make a mistake, the most important thing we can do is to speak it. And that is actually the pathway back to feeling safe and feeling okay again. And I think that as adults, it's often something that is challenging because we didn't necessarily grow up with that message. But we want to take that message and go, now let's work it into our parenting so they know that from day dot, that when they make a mistake, when they feel shame, they run to someone. They run to us. They talk about it straight away. Because if I had buried it in that moment, I'd still be carrying it with me. I'd still be scared that someone might find out. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I emailed an important document to the wrong email address. I was halfway through typing the email address and then I typed it wrong and I hit
That's
send.
the worst.
And then I realised I couldn't take it back.
I really love that story because I think we can all relate to a time where we have felt that crushing level of shame and wanting to bury into a hole. And that's absolutely, that's the whole thing, isn't it? The moment you bring the monster under the bed out and you go, okay, here it is, and it's hairy and it's horns and it's like,
now everyone else has it.
I know. It's like all of a sudden you have the opportunity to go, oh, and now you're not so bad because I can see you, and everyone can see you.
And we can plan it and you're not lurking in the corner and you're not overshadowing me or burdening me anymore. And I just think for our kids, how important to know that from always, to know that when you make a mistake and you feel shame, you run to, not away.
The most. And I love how you brought that round to body autonomy too, because surely shame is perhaps the greatest teaching tool when it comes to moving through abuse or situations that have not been as, I don't know what the correct language is, have not been what we would want them to be.
Yep.
Yeah, so I love that. Our second question is, what have been, and feel free to answer this in any way that feels good for you, what have been the most pivotal books in your lifetime, or the books that if you could give every woman in the world or every young girl or pick an age, doesn't matter, whatever, what are the books that you're like, in your lifetime, you must read these books?
Yeah, it's easy. Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
I haven't read it yet.
the second person to say that, I think. Yeah, definitely Untamed for every woman, like prescribed reading. Just recently people were like, well, why should I read it? I was like, I can't explain that. Just read it and do it right now.
So good.
So Untamed, but also in terms of parenting, the ones I always direct people to is always Parenting from the Inside Out, which is Daniel Siegel and I think Mary Hartzell, off the top of my head. And then following that up with The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline. As a trilogy, those three will shape our parenting, and they also give us the tools to understand ourselves and also influence others. I think they do a really good job of giving us language and the research and the evidence to answer back to others if they say something that undermines us or chips away at our confidence.
So beautiful. Can I just ask, do you have any specific books that talk about body safety or autonomy for children's books that you love?
Absolutely. So the go-to ones in my house, there's Only for Me, which is Due Fall Publishing, if you Google it. I can send you guys the link. That's a great one. It's really lyrical and easy to read. The other one is Everybody's Got a Bottom, which I think, off the top of my head, I think it's Tess Rowley. And that one is really clear in laying out the body safety rules. And it also has the saying, it's repeated over and over, from my head to my toes, I can say what goes. And kids love that. It's easy to remember. It rhymes and it sums up that body autonomy message so clearly.
So beautiful. Thank you. I actually don't have either of those, so I should be getting them.
The other websites I'll direct people to is so Holly Ann Martin, her Facebook page is Safe for Kids, the number 4. She has a lot of great books, and then also Educate to Empower, the number 2. Go to their Facebook page. There's lots of resources on there as well.
Thank you. And our last question is, if you could have a billboard on any major superhighway in any part of the world, what would your billboard say?
We all have the right to feel safe all the time. Or would it be all feelings are normal and okay? No, that's one of my other favourite sayings. But no, I think it would be we all have the right to feel safe all the time.
So good. Maybe you could have one on either side of the road.
Yeah.
So we would love for you to share with us, Caroline, how we can find you, connect with you, get in on Get Smart, or put forward your school presentation to our own schools for what we would love to see.
So my website is saferstrongerkids.com, and on Facebook it's Caroline Ellen, Safer Stronger Kids, and Instagram is @saferstronger, though I'll confess I'm not good at Instagram.
You love it or you hate it, I think.
I just can't get the knack of it. I'm like, I still don't understand how Instagram works. So I spend most of my time on Facebook.
Your Get Smart program, because I do feel like that feels most pivotal, but also the school one.
So if you go to saferstrongerkids.com and then you go to all courses, you'll find Get Smart in there. And the live round has just started on the 20th of August, but it will stay open for enrolments. So I'd love for people to jump in during this live round or at any time that feels good.
Beautiful. And you'll also be jumping into our Soul Driven Motherhood group as well to offer a workshop to our beautiful community, which we're super grateful for.
Great. So excited.
So if you're in Soul Driven Motherhood, you can join that this weekend. And if you're not, you can absolutely come and catch Caroline in there. So you will find more about Soul Driven Motherhood on any of our socials or website. So nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook, Instagram and Pinterest. And to connect with you, Bridgie,
it's suburbansandcastles.com. And you, Jules?
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com.
Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.